You're listening to the Inside the Mix podcast with your host, Mark Matthews.
Hello folks, and welcome to the Inside the Mix podcast. If you are a new listener, a big welcome. Make sure you hit follow on your podcast player of choice. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you get notified of new episodes. And to the returning listeners and all viewers, a big welcome back as always. So a few episodes ago, I did a showdown. I did an A/B of Logic Pro's stem splitter versus G Audio's stem splitter, or track separation, however you want to call it. And that was episode 154. So if you don't know the results, no spoilers here, go and listen to episode 154 or watch it on YouTube. I think it was episode 144, did a demo of how to use Logic Pro's stem splitter. And in this episode, I'm going to do another showdown. Dun, dun, dun. It's going to be another A/B, and this time it's going to be Logic Pro's stem splitter versus the Rip-X DAW track separator or stem splitter, however you want to call it. So let's dive in. In the interest of fairness, I have separated the voice, the vocal, the bass, the drums and percussion, and the other sounds and instruments in Rip-X. You can actually separate the guitar and piano, but you cannot do that in Logic Pro. So you could say that's already put Logic Pro on the back foot, as it were. But as I say, in the interest of fairness, I've only separated it into 4 stems in Rip-X DAW. So if you are using Rip-X, what you need to do is toggle, or rather check, save stems only for DAW MPC DJ. That way, when it's finished the separation process, it will then a finder window will appear, let's say, with those separated stems, that you can do what you want with them, basically. So just going to throw that out there, that you can actually separate guitar and piano with Rip-X DAW, but you can't do that with Logic. So maybe that's already saying 1-0 to Rip-X DAW. So let's move over to Logic now. So we're in Logic Pro, and going forward, I'm going to refer to Rip-X DAW or Rip-X DAW as Rip-X, because it's easier for me. And I am using the same song from episodes 154 and 144, and it's the song called Alive from my EP. It was released in December 2023. I wanted continuity, so if you listen to all 3 episodes as a playlist, let's say, it's the same song, so you can compare apples to apples, as it were. I'm not using different material. So I'm going to play you a section of the original mix, and we're going to use the same section when we're comparing throughout this episode. So this is the original mix of Alive, this particular section. Let's give it a play. Great stuff. So in there we have vocals, we have drums, we have bass, there's some guitar and synths and some other little bits of ear candy going on. So the first stem we're going to audition and compare is the drums stem. So let's play the original Alive drums on their own. So this is the original drum stem, not any of the separated stems. Okay, so what I'm listening for here in this separation is I want to hear that thwack of the snare, the attack of the snare, and that I'm interested to see whether the separation tools capture the reverb or attenuate the reverb of that snare, because it's quite prominent, and also how the cymbals are treated. So you've got that crash. I don't want it to sound brittle. I don't want that to sound brittle. I want the kick drum to retain its power and impact as well. So that's what I'm listening out for. So let's do the Logic Pro one first. So I'm going to unsolo that. So this is the Logic Pro split drum stem. Okay, I think the kick sounds pretty good. The snare, it sounds a bit phasy. Now, I appreciate with the artificial intelligence, with the AI that it's using to separate it out, you're going to have that. But at times, it's kind of going like that, and it sounds a bit like a really bad MP3. But it has retained the impact of the snare for me. The reverb, it's attenuated. It's not captured that reverb. And the hats and the cymbals, the crashes sound okay, but again, they sound a touch brittle to me. So I'm just going to play it one more time before they move on to Rip-X. Yeah, the kick drum sounds kind of like when you get a kick drum and you fill it full of a duvet. We used to do this back when we were in a band. I was in a band and we were rehearsing, and we'd stick, it was quite crude in this rehearsal environment, we'd stick a duvet in the kick drum to dampen it. And that's what it kind of sounds like to me. So it sounds okay. It sounds okay, but let's have a listen to Rip-X and see what this one sounds like in comparison. So this is the Rip-X drums. Interesting. So the kick drum again sounds like it's been dampened. I'm finding that the hi-hats and the cymbals, there's nice stereo separation on them, so it's captured that well. But it kind of does, it's got that sort of thing going on again. It's got a nice attack. It's got a nice presence of the snare, but I feel like it's lost some of the body of the snare. So I'm going to listen to it one more time. Yeah, I think the snare sounds quite good. There are a few other little artifacts in there again that I'm hearing that I didn't hear in Logic Pro. Occasionally there's like, it almost sounds like a dog bark and it kind of goes like that. I cannot pinpoint it, but listen back again and you know what I mean. It sounds quite similar to a dog barking in a way. It's like a roof like that. My microphone's going to hate me for doing that. I think in this instance, and this was the same in the G Audio episode, but I think Logic Pro wins the round for me here. And my memory, because it was a few episodes ago now, but I'm fairly certain Logic Pro won the battle with G Audio with the drums as well. So I would say that is 1-1 because Logic Pro cannot separate piano and guitar. So let's say it's 1-1 at the moment. So Logic Pro wins the drum round for me. So let's move on to bass. So here is the bass stem. This is the original bass stem. So in there, you've got not only sort of, not acoustic bass, but recorded bass, DI bass, and you've got synthesizers as well, providing some bass in this bass stem. So it's interesting to see how the platforms pick out those synthesizer elements, whether or not those synth elements may fall into the other category due to their frequency, the frequencies of those particular synths. So I'd be interested to know how Rip-X picks those out, or whether or not it goes straight for bass. And there's also the slide between notes as well. So it'd be interesting to see how Rip-X picks up the slide between notes, or whether that would fall into the other category as well. So let's start with Logic Pro. So this is the Logic Pro split stem. Yeah, so you can just about hear the slide between notes. You can hear it's almost like a metronome in the background. So it's captured some of the mid-range frequencies of the kit. You've got the going on in the background. And it kind of sounds to me like it's underwater a bit. It does sound a bit like it's underwater to me. So I'm not overly keen on the bass separation for Logic Pro. So let's give Rip-X a go and see how that sounds. Disclaimer here, I haven't listened to any of these RipX DAW stems yet. I've listened to the Logic ones before in a previous episode, but I haven't listened to any of the Rip-X ones. So this is all in real time, as it were, when I'm providing feedback on these. So this is the Rip-X version. I would say that sounds fuller to me, or rounder. It's got more bass presence, more bass element to it to me. It sounds more like a bass guitar. It sounds more like a bass stem to me than the Logic Pro one did. You've still got that sort of metronome sort of sound. It's like someone's wearing headphones and they're recording and it's bleed, but obviously in a full mixdown you're not going to hear that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's captured the slide between notes. I'm just going to play the Logic one again. And the Rip-X. Yeah, I would say the Rip-X bass separation is more testament to actual bass, so like 300 hertz and below, whereas the Logic Pro one, you've sort of got more of the mid-range frequencies in there. You could almost imagine like Rip-X is providing 250, 300 hertz and below, and Logic Pro would provide the upper frequencies, maybe of the synths. So I think in terms of actually separating bass, and if it were a bass guitar, I would roll with Rip-X in this instance. I think Logic is moving more towards mid-rangey frequencies, and we're losing some of those lower frequencies that Rip-X is able to reproduce in the stem separation. So I think Rip-X wins this round for me. So Rip-X is going to win the bass separation. So that is 2-1 to Rip-X. So let's move on to vocals. So let's play the original vocal stem. So let's give it a play. So what I'm listening out for here is the stereo width of the vocal and the backing vocals, the time-based processing. Has it attenuated it? Has it captured it? And also, it's an interesting vocal performance, this one, because when it was recorded, there's a lot of mouth noises, but that was wanted in this particular performance. So has the vocal separation captured those sort of mouth noises? Because the vocalist was very close to the microphone. And let's give it a go. So let's try Logic Pro. Logic, what have you done with this vocal? Let's give it a listen. Interestingly there, again, you've got that almost metronome in the background. It sounds thinner, so it almost sounds there like there is a low-cut, high-pass filter on it around, I don't know, around 1K or something like that. It sounds quite thin to me. It's retained some of that reverb, some of the time-based processing, and it's got the width there as well, but it does sound very thin, very, very thin for me. So it's okay. It's okay. But what it has done, interestingly, now this might be something you want. It has not captured those mouth noises. So maybe that's a good thing in this instance if you're doing a remix and you didn't want that. So, and also it depends on how you want the vocal. Do you want the vocal processing to be removed and stripped back so it's just a clean vocal, or do you want that time-based processing to remain? If it is the former, then maybe Logic Pro wouldn't be the way to go. So let's give Rip-X a go. Now, to me, that is much better. I think that vocal, this is probably the most obvious one out of the three so far. I think that vocal sounds much better. It sounds fuller, it's more vibrant, it's more present. Yes, you've got that metronome click in the background, but I think you're going to have that throughout all of these anyway, so I'm not too bothered about that. But that sounds much better. It has retained the time-based processing, so no, it hasn't attenuated that. But I'm just going to play the Logic one again. And then the Rip-X version. There's just more clarity there. I'm finding it easier to decipher what the vocalist is saying. It just sounds better. Once again, this one is more obvious than the other two, I think, for me in this instance. So I would say, folks, that is 3-1, if my maths is correct. I hope it is. I got an A in GCSE. Mind you, that was over 20 years ago. Not even A's anymore. I think that would constitute a 9 Anyway, that's the UK curriculum or educational system. So yes, 3-1, I think, in this instance to Rip-X. So I think Rip-X has won it, albeit it would be 2-1 if you discounted the fact that Logic cannot separate piano and guitar. So 3-1. So I think Rip-X has won, but we're going to do other anyway. So let's move on to other. I really like doing the other comparison because there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of instruments at play here. We've got some guitars and synths and other bits and pieces as well going on. So I'm interested to see how the stem separators, the track separators, pick this out. So let's play the original mix, the other stem, as it were, from the original mix. The other stem is really interesting because there are various instruments in the same frequency pocket. So how has the stem separator separated these instruments from the other drums, bass, and vocals? So let's have a listen to Logic Pro. For me, it sounds a bit narrow. It sounds muted, and you've lost sort of like, you've got that ba-da-da going on. That's a really flat version of it, but you've lost that sort of brightness as well to that. It sounds quite muted, like there's a bandpass filter on it for me, and we've rolled off a lot of the higher frequency content. So not great. Let's give Rip-X a go. Interesting. I think with this one here, you can hear that it has captured more of the other instruments. There's more of the drums coming through and almost a bit of the bass coming through as well. So I don't think it's separated it as well as Logic Pro, but Logic Pro does sound very muted. The Rip-X version doesn't sound as muted, but I do think it has lost some of that brightness, that lusciousness of the synths again. So I'm just going to play the Logic Pro one again because this is quite a tricky one to pick out. Okay, now the Rip-X. Ooh, it's a tricky one. I think you can hear more of the guitar in Logic Pro, but you've got more of the other instrument stems in the Rip-X version. I think the Rip-X version does sound more lusciousness. It's got more presence. It's brighter. So it's a tricky one. I think if we're going straight down the line in terms of separation, I think Logic Pro has done a better job of separating the other stem, whereas Rip-X has still got some artifacts from the other stems in it. However, Rip-X, I think, just sounds a tiny bit better. So I think in terms of actual separation, Logic Pro probably wins this one, which would put it up 3-2. Now, that might be a contentious decision because I'm going straight for the idea of how well is it separated, not in terms of which one sounds better. Maybe I should go with which one sounds better. If I wanted to go with which one sounds better, it would be Rip-X. If I wanted to go with which one has actually separated it better in terms of removing the other artifacts, then it would be Logic Pro. So I'm probably going to go and say, you could say it's a draw. I'm waffling now, but I think I'm going to go 3-2 to Rip-X with this one here. So Rip-X is the overall winner for the Stem Splitter Showdown. So I really have just scratched the surface with RipX DAW, Rip-X DAW. There's a lot more you can do in it in terms of AI, and it's not just a stem separator tool. And I'm going to have a follow-up video, a follow-up episode where I go through some of the cool features in Rip-X itself. So look out for that episode. But if you want to listen back to previous A/B comparison episodes of stem splitters, the GE Audio one, for example, episode 154. And if you just want to know how to use the Logic Pro stem splitter, check out episode 144. So I hope you found this episode useful, folks. If you do have a stem splitter tool that you would like to see or listen to me compare with Logic Pro, or maybe against Rip-X or against G Audio, leave a comment if you were watching this on YouTube, or just DM me at Inside the Mix Podcast on Instagram. And I look forward to doing more of these comparisons. They are great fun after all. Happy stem splitting.